We are so delighted tonight to have Harley Herrin. And those of you that are familiar with him from the 1831 Garden Center are going to be so excited to hear about his painting and his artistic ability. As I said in the little email that went out, when you go to that garden center, you can see art everywhere. And we're thinking even about doing a plein air painting at the garden center, and he's invited us to come. He said if we chose a day, he would try to get there early and let us start before it gets hot. But we're just glad to have you. And Harley, I think the best thing to happen is for you to speak for yourself tonight. And we thank you for coming.
Brought some notes just to keep me in line, so I don't ramble on that. And if I stick to my notes, we should get out of here by about 11:30 tonight.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank y'all for being here. Thank y'all for coming. A lot of friends who stopped in to see me that I see a lot, but it's good to see y'all here. Appreciate all of y'all coming in. And got my little girl here. She's a budding artist, so she's excited to be here and learn. Let's pull up the page. If you want to check out my art page, I'm slowly working on getting it updated and having information on there.
Are you referring to the Facebook page?
Yes, sorry, yeah, for Facebook page. Harley's Art is the name of it. I kept it simple however many years ago it was I set it up. You can check it out on there. I'll show y'all some more pictures here in just a little bit. But I'm going to start off with a little bit of my history. Long time ago, once upon a time, there was a little brown-haired, or little brown-eyed, bald-headed baby boy, and he grew up to be a big, bald-headed, brown-eyed, bearded boy. And I had, probably from an early age, I had the picture, and I should have shared it on my Facebook page, and I could have pulled it up here, but and Mama didn't have time to dig it out of the photo albums. But I have a picture of me when I was, and I just saw it recently. That I was probably 5, had a little pencil in my hand. Probably the earliest picture that they have of me. Always drawn. Grew up drawing. I'll skim over my notes real quick to make sure I'm staying on point. Always drawn. Started out that at a very early age. Probably the biggest and the first time I started really drawing was when I broke both my wrists. I was 11 and ended up not able to do much, which really sucked during that time when I really wanted to be drawing and sketching. But not long after that, I started taking color pencil lessons from Ruth Collins. Many of you probably knew Miss Collins. If you didn't, she was an amazing artist. Had a heavy German accent, so it was very hard to understand her as a small kid. I remember going to her house, and she lived in what seemed to me like a secret garden place. When you pulled up to the drive, it was surrounded by camellia bushes. Big, tall, 2-story blue house had a narrow hallway that was covered in paintings on the walls, and as you walked up, you turned to the right, and there was on the corner by the garden, there was a glass room that overlooked the gardens where we did all of our artwork. And she would sit down and she would lay a book in front of me, like a coloring book, and she would say, just start drawing and work as you can. So I'd sit there and I'd start drawing, and she would say, copy what you see. So I'd sit there and I'd copy it. Here I am coming into it expecting these big pointers and all this stuff, and we go in there and we just start drawing. So I'm drawing out sketches and drawing different things, and she's going through, and she would walk by occasionally and she'd go, very good, and she'd walk by, and so I'm like, okay, what does this need? You know? But we would go through and would copy those, and took color pencil lessons from her for about a year. I was very young, obviously inexperienced, and very, very in the early stages, and I was expecting, magic to happen during that time, and because I found out how patient I was during a lot of that, because I wanted things to happen just fast. Same thing with this stuff. I thought this was going to happen. I can look at my work and tell there's a ton of things that need to be improved on and changed in different ways, but biggest thing I took away from Miss Collins after that time was practice. It was practice, practice, practice. If you want to get better at it, keep staying at it. Anyway, from then on, My grandparents poured into me a lot. I think my first art set came from my paternal grandmother. She was, or is, she's still with us. She is, her mother was full-blooded Ute Indian, her dad was Italian, Hispanic Italian. So she was very dark-skinned, and poured a lot of Native American stuff. She would talk about that. She had a couple of relatives who painted and drew, all kind of stuff. But they, I would pay attention to their work. I would learn about her stuff. She probably bought me my first art set. I don't have any of that anymore, but she probably poured into me the most to start off with. She bought me my first art set. It was at Christmas. Used all those up because it doesn't take long, especially when you're drawing a lot. Once, probably the year after, my maternal grandmother, my Nana Faye, she actually bought me another art set from the JCPenney's catalog back when we used to get those. And that was, she wanted to know what I wanted for Christmas, and it was an art set. So got that. I didn't bring them with me today, but I still have some of the original color pencils from, I just turned 35 this year, and I was 11 when I took color pencils from Miss Collins. And I still have a lot of those color pencils, so it's really cool to, because if you're like me with art, I save every last scrap, and I'm sitting there trying to draw something with a tiny piece of something, because it's just one of those weird things that artists do. After that, probably would fast forward up to, I drew off and on, fast forward to the early 2000s, I believe it was 2004. Drew a lot all up until that point, made all kind of stuff. Mainly worked with color pencils and pens. Got into painting in 2004. My grandmother was part of a Bell South Telephone Company retirement group, and they were working on a mural for what is now Waycross, or Satilla Waycross Health and Rehab, I think is what it's called now. At that time it was Satilla, or maybe it was Waycross Health. Anyway, it was a local nursing home. We did a mural on the wall, and I was introduced to Miss Rosalind Deal. A lot of y'all might have known Miss Rosalind Deal. This is actually a painting of her. She was my inspiration to start painting, and I just thought it was really cool. At the time I met Miss Rosalind, she was probably 84. She was 84. She painted stuff for the Swamp Park. I thought it was really cool that she was just doing painting in her 80s. So she said, "Why don't you try painting?" So I thought, okay. Went out and bought some craft paints. At the time I started in craft paints, and I still work in a lot of craft paints. A couple of these pieces were done in craft paints. Anyway, I started painting with that stuff, and I'm actually going to be passing around some of my pieces that were some of my first landscapes that I cringe looking at now, but it's great to look back on and learn from what I had started out from, and learn where shading needed to come in, developing depth. Miss Rosalind really poured into me and encouraged me. I would go visit her about once a week, and we'd talk about stuff. We painted stuff for the Swamp Park back when the Swamp Park had the country store. We had a little 8-foot booth, and anyway, I painted off and on there, hung out. Some of you might remember back when Cohen's Art and Framing was at Flanders Shopping Center up in the corner. Linda Cohen had a business there and had a lot of art stuff, and we would all hang out on Friday nights. Dr. Kubik, Roland Thurston, Marilyn Waters, Dottie Ferguson, several of us, we'd all hang out on Friday nights, because I was one of those weird kids that would rather hang out at the art gallery than go hang out with friends and waste time at the mall and all that kind of stuff. And we'd all hang out and talk and paint, and we'd work on commissions and talk with each other. Got into the professional tube acrylics at that point. Still very young into it, very early. Took a lesson from Roland Thurston during that time, the late great Roland Thurston. Took a lot away from a lot of his stuff. When I say take a lot away, I learned a lot under his guidance, especially when developing the landscapes and learning about how to start a painting and shading and color. And we did a lot on Friday nights. And then over the next few years, I did a couple presentations for some places and different ways in portrait painting. I got into that. I enjoy portrait painting as long as it's not something I have to do for somebody. I love being able to not have the pressure of working on the pictures without, because I don't want to mess up and I don't want to disappoint anybody, and I want to do justice, especially in the case where most of my pictures are, at the time I painted Miss Rosalind, she wasn't deceased, but several people want paintings of their family who are deceased, and I don't want to disappoint and I don't want to hurt feelings, so I'm very skeptical of myself, and I'm very cautious when I paint those things. Up until Megan and I got married, I worked on art a lot. Megan and I got married in 2012. Worked on painting off and on then. Matter of fact, this painting down here was done when when Megan was pregnant with Addison. It long before we had 2 kids. There's actually, you can barely see them, but there's 3 in there. Anyway, there's little baby owls and the mother owl in this picture, and I think I entered this in one of the first Ben Smith art competitions I entered in. I ended up working in the painting stuff and working more in my artwork, developing that up until probably the year I started going to college. I went to college in 2015, and my artwork took a back burner setting. It sat there for a long time. I'm slowly getting back into it now. When I started working at the garden center, we started painting the boards for the back, and we'll get into those in just a few minutes. Matter of fact, I'm actually working on one of this season's boards on the projector. Every year our owner liked to change it up, so we would change out the designs. That's the fun part for me, especially having complete creative freedom. Something I struggle with, and I think many artists struggle with, is when you're limited to a certain thing without the freedom of being able to be completely creative. I think the client or the person who commissions the work suffers in the end because the artist is not able to reach their true potential because of pressure and different things. A lot of my art developed over time because I was very much an introvert years back. Working at the garden center and being in the public eye has really brought me out of that for the good. I've enjoyed getting to know people. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy seeing people laugh. Still painting as much as I can. Finished this one back in the poinsettia painting back in November. That painting of the Death, Burial, Resurrection, and actually didn't even realize until I completed it, was Second Coming in the top right corner, was from a few years ago. That took a long time to paint. I found that if I force myself to take time and actually work on the painting, I'm more satisfied with the piece when I'm through, although I can still sit and pinpoint and pick different things that bother me about it, which I think all of us artists are our own worst critic. We can sit there and we can pick apart anything we do. It could be absolutely perfect, and I feel like I could, which has never happened yet, but I can sit there and pick and pinpoint different things on different pieces. Probably, for me, inspiration would probably be, the jumping off point would be emotion. Being an artistic and creative person, a lot of times creative people are driven by emotion, and they're driven by, their creativity is driven by something, especially for creative people, like even comedians. Early life, there was little different things that happened that caused you to develop these comfort things and different things that I feel like develop creativity over time. I use humor a lot. I use my art a lot for emotion. It makes me feel better. It helps me feel more comfortable. Emotion would be my jumping off point for inspiration. Inspiration I can find anywhere. Oddly enough, just sitting and, like, I can't remember who was talking about, you were talking about the first part of the meeting, the plein airs, where you go out there and you just sitting there, and even if you don't have an actual subject matter, you can find subject matter, even if it's just 2 people sitting down. The pumpkin patch. I automatically set myself in the mindset of pumpkins and the fall scenes. It's for kids, so I automatically think silly, and I'm a big kid at heart anyway, so Disney animation was one of the biggest things that inspired me to develop more art. I loved, growing up, we watched Disney movies, and it wasn't just Disney, there was Warner Brothers and several things. Animation was my first dream job I wanted to be involved in. Due to being a major introvert back in the days, that sort of messed me up on pursuing that career. So somehow landed into plants. That's another story for another day. Finding out that I could work my art into the plants really had me head over heels for that once I got into that, because I could actually create paintings with plants versus using actual acrylics and things, and still be able to do that with paintings. That, you know, going back to emotion and developing things with the paintings. In this particular picture, originally it did not have the nativity scene in the background. It had sort of a sunset look, and my wife, who is also my best and worst critic, said it looked like the hills were on fire. So I had to take and paint over that and develop it into something else. And I thought, I've already got death and burial in there, and didn't even realize resurrection could be involved with the sky and the second coming. But ended up working the nativity in the back. Also through it, I wanted to develop emotion with it, the happiness of the birth, of Christ's birth, and then when you go to the death, it didn't really show his life other than the journey with the path that kind of comes along here. And you get up to Golgotha where the death path happened. Starting up here, there's a lot of dead trees, there's dead branches, but as you come down here, life seems to spring forth. There's a lot of green. Leaves are missing on some parts, but they're budding out. And then obviously the Easter lilies was something I took the liberty, as with an artistic license you can create a lot of things. I still want to stick with a lot of truth with this particular picture, but I did use my artistic license to develop with the Easter lilies as it got to the stone, the light hitting the area where Christ rose from, and then second coming, which hasn't obviously happened yet, but I was working that into this part here. Plus I just wanted to end the whole story with the painting with that. This is one of my favorite pieces so far. This canvas actually originally came after Miss Roseland passed. Her son, who's a very good friend of mine, gave me a lot of her pieces, and this canvas was one of her canvases. So this means more so to me with that. But anyway, developing emotion. The duty of an artist in a lot of ways. I remember watching, I can't remember what movie it was, but I remember an artist who played a character, or a guy who played a character of an artist in a movie, said that the duty of an artist is to shed light on the darkness in the world and to inspire others. And that's something I've tried to invoke with a lot of my pieces, whether it's through humor, whether it's through emotion, brightness, happiness. Anytime I can do that. Florals are something that I've started pursuing a little bit more. This is actually one of the older pieces that I have. It belongs to my grandmother. I actually while I was a few minutes behind, I actually ran to her as we were shelling peas today. So she was over there helping us, and I was like, "You got to paint in your house? Can I go by and get it?" She goes, "Yeah." So anyway, Addison and I flew over there and got it. This she's had for a while. Painting of some irises, probably one of my first floral pieces. And then cartoon work I do a lot of, or something new I'm working on. This is actually, Addison is a huge Star Wars fan, so we ended up working these into her bedroom. I talked about my inspiration, or what inspires me. Emotion is probably the biggest thing. It could be anything. I could walk out here right now and see something crazy go on, or even just a little picture. I take a lot of pictures on my phone, as anybody who has a telephone could tell you, or as if they see my telephone and my pictures, and I'll take the time to show you all later, there's 17,000 pictures literally on my telephone, most of which are my children and paintings and plants. But when I started out with acrylics, something I followed early on, Roland Thurston was an amazing artist, and something that he taught me was, he'd always talk about the great white canvas, which was always the big scare for any artist. When you go up there and you stare at this big blank white canvas, and it's intimidating to see that big glaring glowing white canvas up there. So an artist that he followed called Jerry Yarnell would say, watch, and he'd say tint the canvas, and it'll take the pressure down on you a little bit. And I started out with neutral bases. A lot of artists I've followed, matter of fact, on that particular painting of the poinsettia over here, this started out in what I believe was a red background. I took the same red that was on there, thinned it out, did the drawing, washed over it, and then the rest sort of just layered and developed. Like with acrylics, is a lot of layering, darkness to light, Some cases, sometimes you work with a medium color and then you work your different shading and layers in between that. But generally a piece starts out with a wash over it. I have no idea what this piece was going to be originally, because some of you probably know with art, you start something and you set it on a shelf and it sits there for weeks, months, years, a long time in some cases. This has been sitting there for about 6 months. I honestly don't know what it was going to be, but apparently it was going to start out very dark or some kind of nature picture. It might have even been, if I really think about it, it might have been just for fun. I was inspired by one of Jorah's, I think it was Jorah's pictures, at the show that was at the Swamp Park, and I wanted to do an alligator just for fun. Jorah does an amazing job with wildlife, and I'm going to give it a try one day, but that might have been within. And then I think florals, I want to get into florals, so I thought about a magnolia. The canvas, once you get past that pressure point of the white canvas, then you can really let it flow into you. Over that time, after you get started with that, it works its way into what I had learned to be known as blocking, which is where you go in and you do these big blobs of color. So you have this big, ugly, big blobby, and then you get discouraged again because you look at it and think that's not going to be anything at any point anytime soon, and then you start to layer and develop and you shade and you go back up in here and add more stuff. Even this is obviously not a finished painting. Have big streaks and different things. You can use the brush strokes for different pieces, different parts of your paintings. The brush strokes along here for the water. I love color. Being an artist, I think that just comes hand in hand, but I love color in general, and bringing color through the whole painting so that with your composition you also carry your eye across the whole canvas, because essentially you would start your journey through the painting here. You'd go up and you'd see all the mountain scenes here, but then you see the stream that carries you out to the bridge, which is where you were headed to anyway while you were on your walk through the garden. Then you come up to the old shack, and then when you see the old shack, there's eventually going to be some flowers along here, and then you see the old tree, and then that carries your eye down here to the water, and then to the rocks where there's some more wildflowers that were also over here, and then back to your path again. So the goal is to carry your eye all the way across the canvas. At least one of my goals is to evoke emotion, to give light, learn a lot about depth and layering with that. I think I've talked enough about all that stuff, so I'm going to move on to the projector, if I can get myself out of the front of it. Can I turn this sideways? Okay. Let's see what we can find in here. That was just a fun thing that internet generated. That was actually this particular painting. I think I have a picture of coming up, but that was in my palette. I brought my palette if anybody ever wants to look at it. It's nothing special. It's just a limited palette. I used to try to get every bottle and every color I could find at the craft store. And you can ask, when Megan and I were dating, in my art studio I had, there was a whole stack of craft paints that were just all over the place and had every color in the rainbow, almost as much as Michael's and Hobby Lobby have. But I learned how to use a limited palette, how to mix colors.
Do you mind sharing that palette? Can you pick it up and show it?
Yeah.
I noticed it's a wet.
It is.
A wet canvas.
I use acrylics. I use a Stay Wet palette. Invested in one of these. One of the artists I follow uses a Stay Wet palette, and they use I had a piece of glass cut by Boat Rock Glass. This is the last hot mess of everything I was working on for the last painting I did, and I don't even know that, I don't have a picture of that on Facebook yet, but it'll definitely be coming on my page in the next few weeks. Limited palette. Some of this has molded up a little bit just because I kept it kind of over to the bedroom side while I was working on pictures, but I work over here. I love the glass top because when you're finished you can just spray a little water on it, and you take a palette knife or a razor blade and you just take and scrub all that off into the corner like this little mess is right here, and you start all over again. Add a little more paint. Every once in a while I'll change this palette out depending on what I'm working on. I do cheat sometimes, to be honest, and I use skin tone, but I tint it. That just depends on how big of a hurry I'm in. If it's something, normally I try to mix my own skin tones, but the rest of this is pretty well full color spectrum. Limited palette again, just the basic colors with a few little add-ons. Alizarin Crimson is something I use, although you could make that very easily with the purple or the red. Any of these colors would be definitely more secondary colors, but anyway, I just, depending on what I'm working on, that's the palette I use.
Harley,
Yes.
is that paint ready to put your brush in?
Yes. While you're working with acrylics, a lot of times they'll dry out just through the air, not like oils. The oils are very forgiving. The acrylics are less forgiving whenever the air is dry, especially in plain air. It's not always your best friend. So I keep a little water bottle, which I didn't bring with me, and I just occasionally mist the palette, mainly to keep them wet. There are certain things that you can use, like some spray mixes, different things that don't necessarily dilute the paint. I normally put a touch of water in whenever I go to start mixing the color anyway, so it doesn't really bother me the fact that there's water on it. You can see some of the pigments have leached out through the paper towel. It doesn't affect my work.
Where's your paper towel? Under the glass?
Yes, I lay a couple pieces of papers of towel underneath the painting. Underneath the
They're wet.
paints. You can't see them now because they've been stained with everything going on in the picture, but in the palette. But that also helps keep it wet. You could work right on the glass; it wouldn't bother it at all. But that's just something I have for personal preference.
And where did you stay?
This I actually purchased, I believe, from Hobby Lobby.
Really?
You can probably find them online. Amazon, I'm sure, has a way to get them. I don't remember it being more than $20, so altogether I might have put $30 in it because the glass wasn't even that much. Yes, sir.
Do you ever put yours in the refrigerator at night?
Yes, I actually prefer to keep it in there. The only reason this was in the bedroom is because I forgot it. I put it over to the side after I finished the painting, and then we had so much going on last week with getting the pumpkin patch ready that I didn't even pay attention to it, because I just finished a piece a few nights ago for a friend of mine who recently got married. This is a mailbox. We had an old mailbox at the garden center. Needed something to do with it, and an artist, anything's a canvas. So I said, well, we're not going to throw it away, because that's another problem I have. My wife can tell you all about that. Took it, slapped some paint on it. I spray painted it. This is just craft paint, and just because it's going to be outside, I didn't want to put too much time into it or too much effort. I wish I had a close-up picture of it, but I don't know if you can zoom in on this or not.
Did you seal it after you finished using it?
I didn't seal this one in particular. This, back when I first got into art, I studied Donna Dewberry, which probably a lot of y'all remember, with the one-stroke painting, where you dipped your brush in one side of one color and the other, and then you blended it together, and then you made one stroke, which is where she got her signature one-stroke painting. Those flowers were mainly one-stroke painting flowers, with a little liberty I used with some of the background greenery and stuff. Lettering is something I've done, which you can see on the front of the front of the mailbox. I'm not a big fan of lettering, but I do it, especially if it's a commission piece. And somebody asked me, this is some more of that lettering. This isn't the best picture of that picture, but I had a friend whose mother, her and her husband love the mountains, and he recently passed away, or not recently, he'd been passed away for several years, and this was a gift for her mom. Those are supposed to be rhododendrons in the front during the bloom season in the Blue Ridge Mountains, because that's where they love to go. That was a saying that they like to tell each other, I love you to the mountains and back, so we included that into the painting. The painting was only, I think, 12 by 12. This is something, back to portraits and deceased people. This lady had lost her mother recently, and her friend that she worked with asked me if I would do this piece for her mom, or of her mom. This was her first day in heaven, I think is what we ended up calling it. She was, I never met her mom, but I heard a lot of good things about her mom. Let's see if we can zoom it in. Skin tones are something challenging sometimes. This one I developed over time. You can't really see, but there are actually tears coming out of her eyes. I had to use a very tiny brush for that. I don't do well, because being big-handed and big, it's hard for me to work on tiny, fine details. And I remember Miss Roseland had a paintbrush that literally looked like one eyelash, and she would sit there and she would lick the brush. She would always lick the brush, and then she would dip it in paint, which at the time I thought was kind of gross, but I find myself doing it now. So yeah, one of those weird artist things. Anyway, we did the clouds around it. This was a friend's granddaughter. You know, I would love to give you a picture of a picture, but that somebody else did. You know, you don't take it at heart a lot of times, but sometimes it'll bother you. I don't let things bother me like they used to. This painting of a rooster was for a friend of mine whose husband passed away, and this was his favorite rooster. Roosters I've done before in the past. I've got one from my mom. This is the palette again. There's the one of Miss Roseland. Miss Roseland really was my big inspiration to get started painting. She was a dear friend, greatly missed. This was my son's bedroom when we lived at the house when we rented from my uncle. It's made to look like the walls were made out of Legos and the plaster had fallen off because he likes to destroy his room. This was a close-up of the other painting when I did the nativity scene in it. This is one of the bulls. This was the baby bull for the pumpkin patch. See if we can zoom in on him. I had a pacifier in his mouth, and then we ended up taking the pacifier off at some point. I don't remember why, but this is one of the paintings for the farm. This was for the laser tag. This was a scarecrow. Whoop. I didn't mean to skip that. Scarecrow, hay bales. That was with spray cans, just for fun. This was one of the boards. This is one of the original boards. This was some of the other boards. We developed things all kind of different. This is a shiplap mural. That was a plain white wall, and we did a shiplap mural for my wife. The house that we were living in at the time had the kitchen and dining room connected, and she wanted a shiplap mural, so we went all the way across the thing. And you can imagine sitting there with a ruler every 8 inches and then a 1/4 inch line, and then having to hand brush that black line because you want to make it look rough like it's actual wood, and then brushing in the wood grain. You can see it a lot better in the original picture than on the projector, but making the circles to make it look like knots in the wood, going around the curves, painting. That kind of painting was fun, and I enjoy the faux painting. Faux techniques. That's a zoom out of it. You can see up there was the blank wall and taped off. I'm gonna say that was fun, but that'd be a lie. This is a bass fish. This is one of my favorite pictures. This hung in my bedroom for a long time. Then now it's hanging in storage. But this was Brenda Harris painting I actually copied. That's one reason I've never sold it and kept it for myself, because I did it exactly like she did it in the painting. You can zoom in. I didn't really get the scales and the details. Again, I'm not an animal painter, so it's hard for me to really capture everything. This was the original of a painting that my wife commissioned me to do when we first got married, and she loved the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. I actually made that frame out of some old molding that was from an old house that we had. This was a waterfall. These are some of my very early pieces, so y'all are going to see soon on my Facebook page, if you follow it, there's going to be a lot more new stuff coming up. I don't know about y'all, that's supposed to be a cow, but it looks like a possessed rat sitting up there. So again, back to when stuff bothers you, that drives me insane every time I see it. This is probably the first time I remember doing like farmland, so that was fun to figure out a way to paint that. The tracks in the road, I don't think I'd done that before then. You can't see the tin or the hay, but there's a lot of tin, and there might even be some hay back there. This was one of some daisies. I actually ended up doing this painting for a friend on their wall. This was an abstract. I don't do many abstracts, but this was a fun abstract. Just a butterfly painting. Another abstract. Apparently I was into butterflies at the time. This is another painting of the same painting I did the other time, but I was gifting it to one of my old bosses who was a huge fishing fan. This was a waterfall scene. I think I made that frame too. No, I painted it. It was turquoise and then crackled. Oh, one of my first florals. Well, one of my first fine art florals. I've done, again, the one-stroke painting, but this was one of my favorite pieces. This actually belongs to one of my distant cousins now. She put it in her house in St. Simons. I would like to go back and get it, but it's hers. Oh, This painting I was going to bring. I actually painted this while I was in the college program. Mark Deal has this painting in his house. We were not able to get that one. We were able to get the one of Miss Roseland. I gifted that to Mark after, not long before Miss Roseland passed, I believe, if not after. This is the greenhouse painting. A lot of stuff going on in this picture. Going back to art, I can sit here and pick apart this painting. There's a lot going on all up in here.
I need you to do a tutorial about that glass.
That
greenhouse.
the glass was interesting. I've done glass years ago, so this was kind of a new thing. And if you're really able to see the painting, I put a lot of detail into the very front there. You can't really see there's pots, there's actually geraniums, there's snake plants, which some of y'all don't know what I'm talking about. Other people are like, whatever. But did the brick, a lot of fun. The brick wall here was a very challenging part of that painting. This tree bothers me every time I look at it. You know, again, with your art, I can sit here and there's a lot of things I can nitpick apart about this, but there's a glare on it there, so you're not actually getting the full detail of the tree on that part. Then I do cartoon stuff, which is fun. I don't remember what this guy's name was, but he was supposed to be like a little elf that did gardening stuff. This piece is already in here. I think y'all have seen it over here on the side. This is some of the sculpture work. I'm going to try to breeze through this. I don't want to take too much longer. This is polymer clay work I did. This was for a friend who was a Santa Claus fanatic. Polymer clay I got into sometime around the time after, so probably about 2007, somewhere in there. During that time, I was into polymer clay, did ornaments. I do some lettering. Again, that is not my favorite thing to do, but if my belly is covering all this, just let me know. The hand painting, this was for a friend who had an event at their house in Blackshear, actually a distant cousin. We did, the particular room was decorated with gold and silver ornaments, so we incorporated that into the, see if I can get a zoom in of it. We incorporated that into the sort of decorations on it, and then the hand lettering was kind of rough. If y'all know Pat Tucker, that was her house. She did a tour of homes that year during the Christmas season, and that's actually a zoom out of all the, she showed me some of the decorations, and then I took the liberty of doing the rest of it. This is a polymer clay ornament of Mrs. Claus. Here she is there, got a little poinsettia in her hat. Had a big, nice little sweet cheeks and some big red lips. This reminded me of my Aunt Martha, because that's about what her face looked like, and she would always, every time I see her, give me a huge, like a plunger on my face kiss. Yeah, it scares you when you're a kid, but now it doesn't bother. This is a little zoom up. I did lettering. This was for Hudson's first birthday. That was a test painting for the painting I did for the sign. This is actually at Coastal Pines right now. When I went to the program, we did a lesson on honeybees, or bees. I don't know that this is particularly a honeybee because I haven't studied the entomology of them enough to know for sure. But this was part of the display. This is an old fisherman. Which I'm not sure why it's not showing. Maybe I showed the details on the hat there. Oh, here we go. This is part of my Santa Claus ornaments. I did a lot of Santa Claus ornaments. They didn't look much different than this, other than the fact that they weren't wearing that. And I did a bunch of Santa Claus ornaments originally. They developed over time, so that's a close-up of the detail in his face. The picture's a lot better on the page. Then people would request pink or green and different things. There's the original picture. He looks kind of sad, but again, that goes back to, I can sit here and tweak it. Did a clown for my Nana. She's a huge clown fan. There he is again. I love working polymer clay. This was a commission from one of my friends. This was her dad's house. We did this commission. Then the little John Deere painting for apparently a kid named Trey, who was turned into. This is of my grandparent-in-laws. This was them sitting together. When I did this, I had never met Miss Mildred, but she had passed about 2 years before, and that was Mr. Estes. I didn't make the bench. Did murals. I'm going to breeze through some of this stuff. This was from my cousin. This actually is still a Jamestown Baptist, and this was back 13 years ago, which is hard to believe because I assumed that they would have painted over it by now. But they did all the. This was at DFAX years ago. Gosh, this was probably about 15 years ago. This was in one of the rooms at DFAX. This was in the the lobby. This was a youth room for Crossview Church. We used metallic paints. It was kind of a solar system thing. We used a lot of stuff that would glow in the dark if they used black lights. This was a screen and different setup. That was a fun painting. This was a logo for Jamestown Baptist for one of their children's unit. That was all freehanded. So if you can imagine sitting there actually having to draw out the detail on the letters and making sure that exactly, and even then I can look at it and, you know, like, oh, that's wrong. But Bulldog, that was for a friend of a Concrete Bulldog. This was for Global Telehealth. Ms. Paula Guy commissioned me to do this probably around the same time I did the others. This was there up until about 2 years ago, and I believe they painted over it now. This was the Atlanta Braves fan, little boy. His mama commissioned me for that. This was Mama's rooster. That was in my niece's bedroom. This was my nephew's bedroom. It looked like a baseball. This was a painting of my hand. Don't ask me why. It just it was just one of those things. And my thumb bothers me, but every time I look at the picture, it's exactly how my thumb looks. But it looks like I broke my thumb and it healed that way. More of those, some hand lettering. This was of a friend of mine's dad. Had a lot of Native American blood in him. The picture shows up a lot better online. Well, you can see the picture, the details there. Christmas picture. This was on Addison's wall when she was born. This was more of her artwork for her bedroom. I love the movie Aladdin, and that was the lettering when I was little, and that was the lettering from that. There were some more things that were on her wall. That was actually the whole wall. This was that hibiscus painting. This was a monkey, not a self-portrait. This is a monkey of that was on Jamestown Baptist wall. Tiger, emu, or whatever that thing's called. This was the whole wall. I'm gonna breeze through these because there's a lot of these. More of the beaches, baseballs. This was a sports room that we did. That was a soccer ball, a baseball, and a bat. Gators. Then they had lettering and signs on the walls. This was my favorite room was the ocean room. That's my favorite sea creature. There's a whole lot more stuff probably on the page. That was more of their stuff. A lot of the paintings you've already seen. Anyway, hope I didn't bore y'all.
Thank you.
Oh, this was actually the first time I ever did a talk. This was when in 2012 when Megan and I, or 2009 when Megan and I got married. This was a week before we got married, and this was at the Better Hometown Black Shirt Artist Guild. Did a lesson on portrait painting, or a presentation. I actually had hair then. Look.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. It was there. I can grow a lot of things, but hair is not one of them anymore. Anyway, I enjoy painting a lot of stuff. Probably the thing I would like to leave y'all with and take away is get out there and do something, slap some. I remember Roland telling us to slap some paint on the canvas and just do it. Just have some fun. And find out what inspires you and build on that. Today I don't have any pictures up there of the farm stuff, but just check out the page at some point when you can, and there'll be a lot of stuff for the farm cutouts and all. That's a lot of fun for the kids. I enjoy seeing kids happy and them having fun, because I remember when I was a kid being able to do that kind of stuff. But get out there and practice. I try to tell Addison all the time, she was very much like me when I was little. You want to be able to sell the Rembrandts and the Van Goghs and all that stuff initially, but you need to start out practicing. I have some pieces of my early work if y'all want to check it out. This is probably some of my first landscapes, but a lot of fun getting out there and painting. And thank y'all for inviting me, and I've enjoyed it.
Hallelujah.
Thank you.
So much.